Oh, excuse my very loud dog. Apologies. Um, so if you're not interested in that, no worries. You'll feel free to leave the Zoom. Apologies. Very large German Shepherd. Okay, so we are the Thurston Youth Climate Coalition, or TYC. I'm here. We've got Laszlo and we've got Jamie. We're going to be presenting the TCMP 101, which about the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan, which go back to 2021. In response to effective activism and advocacy, the TCMP was passed. The overall goal of the plan is to mitigate or lessen the Thurston County carbon emissions by 45% below 2015 levels by 2030, and then 85% below by 2050. It's important to note that the plan is only for emissions produced in the county, so it's not like all of Washington. And the reason we do this presentation is because although this plan is great, it's very confusing to the average person. Like if you somehow, it's kind of hard to find, first of all, but if you like find it, it's just like a 100-page document with 70 strategies, and it's all very confusing. So last summer, Tyke was like, maybe we should make this easy to understand, because if you don't understand something, how are you going to advocate for it? So in the chat, we have a link to a zine. We also have physical zines that we can bring next week if you're going to be at church in person. And in those zines are basically what we're going to be talking about, just in a physical form. The structure breakdown for the TCMP is that there are 5 main focus areas, and under each of those we have strategies, and under each of the strategies we have individual action items. The strategies are what we want to do, and the individual action items are how we go about doing that. And then associated with each individual action item is a main implementer, which would be like the entity that will be most involved in whatever action is. So we have the zine link in the chat, and we have these 3 lovely people presenting. That presentation should take about 35 minutes or less, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So we welcome all questions, but it is important to note that we are high schoolers, and we will answer to the best of our abilities, but we also encourage you to go out and research beyond this, because this is truly meant to just be like base level 101 stuff. So without further ado, I'll give it over to Jamie Leduc to talk about water and waste.
Hello, I am Jamie. I use any pronouns, and today I will be talking about the water and waste section of the TCMP. This part of the document addresses the ways that we manage water and waste because it has a direct impact on the climate because of methane released from water decomposition, as well as transportation and energy needs surrounding processing waste and water. Luckily, Thurston County is ahead of many other local governments in terms of water management because of how our Lot Clean Water Alliance works. So the main focus of this section is to decrease our waste emissions, which have made up a notable portion of overall emissions in the past. 2 overall goals of this section are to reduce wastewater emissions by 20% from the year 2015 to 2030, and reduce per capita solid waste by 10% by 2030 and 30% by 2050. These will be measured in progress checks by tons of water that went to the landfill and annual emissions from wastewater. The document notes that the goals and implementations of such will likely change as our technology and methods of managing evolve. Water and waste is broken down into 5 strategies: increasing efficiency of water and wastewater infrastructure, reducing water consumption, reducing emissions from wastewater treatment operations, diverting more solid waste from landfills, and reducing consumption of carbon-intensive goods and services. For the first and third strategy, LOT would play a large role in implementation, while the others will mostly need to be handled by local governments of Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey. The TCMP provides some examples of specific actions in these strategies and evaluates their effects in different categories. The first item in this section is to make energy use more efficient in our water and sewage treatments by conducting improvements in infrastructure. This is listed as the most impactful of our emissions, as well as holding value for ecosystem health and adaptation. The action to reduce our water consumption is to conduct water audits of government facilities. The action to reduce wastewater emissions is to research and implement ways to capture nitrous oxide emissions and analyze the cost and benefits associated with this. To divert solid wastes, the TCMP recommends waste audits to be implemented, as well as expanding our county's Waste Less Food program. Finally, to reduce carbon-intensive goods, there is an action that would partner with local governments and businesses to reduce carbon footprints of their supply chains. And I'm going to be passing the mic to Laszlo.
Hello, I'm Laszlo. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm presenting on the agriculture, prairies, and forest section of the TCMP. Well, forest, agricultures, and prairies account for a very small percentage of our county's overall carbon emissions. They can help capture carbon for the rest of the county and therefore increase our net emissions. Our first strategy is to encourage farms to reduce their emissions from manure and fertilizer. This will be accomplished through education, grants, and loans. And the main implementer of this would be the Thurston Conservation District and a project being led by the Washington State University. Our second strategy would be expanding our regenerative agriculture. The Thurston Conservation District will provide education to farmers on how to increase organic matter and water retention on their farms. An example would be using drip tape, which decreases the amount of water that is wasted because the water goes directly to the roots of the plants, and adding compost back into the soil increases water retention, which will decrease the runoff. You can support this work by buying food from local organic farmers, as well as volunteering and going to educational events hosted by the Thurston Conservation District. The rest of our strategies from this section are about preserving and managing forests and prairies. First, we have reforestation and afforestation. Reforestation is where you plant trees in areas that have been depleted, usually through logging. And afforestation is when we plant trees in areas that have never been forested before. These will happen through developing reforestation programs and finding priority areas where reforestation would be the most important. Next, our local governments are working towards maximizing tree canopies on their land. They're establishing a baseline for urban tree canopy and will set goals for increasing urban tree density. And finally, our local governments are supporting habitat conservation plans for endangered and threatened prairie species. The best way to hold the government accountable and make sure that they do all the things under these strategies is to call and send letters to our city councils and local governments, as well as attending city council meetings and public comment. I'll pass it back to Dio.
Hello. Again, I'm Dio. I use he, him pronouns. I'm going to be talking about buildings and energy. So, for buildings and energy, the first strategy is to reduce energy use in existing residential buildings, which would decrease the amount of energy used in current homes and apartments. This is currently the region's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, and it's important to note that more than 2/3 of housing units that will exist in 2050 already exist right now, so retrofitting current buildings is key. An example of this would be property tax breaks for landlords who install energy conservation measures in rental housing. The main implementer for this would be local governments, and ways to help would be to engage with them, send letters, attend meetings, and talk in public comment. The next strategy is to reduce energy use in existing commercial/industrial buildings, which would decrease the amount of energy used in current commercial buildings through incentives, grant fundings, and laws. Energy used to power businesses contributes more than 1/4 of the region's carbon footprint. And there's a big scale range of businesses from like small to massive. Commercial businesses are mostly concentrated in Olympia, while industrial Businesses are concentrated more in Tumwater and Lacey. So this strategy takes into account all of those things. And an example of the individual action item would be to install LED lighting in public buildings and infrastructure. And for all of these, basically, the main implementer will be local governments, and the ways you can help are what we said before, letter writing, public comment, holding them accountable. So I won't keep saying that every time, but you know what we mean. The next strategy is to reduce energy use across building types, which would implement programs to educate the public about how to decrease energy use. As this information becomes available, it's very important to share it to the public. An example would be energy education for industry professionals, building owners, and managers. Then the next strategy is reduce energy use in new construction or redevelopment, which would decrease the amount of energy used when buildings are created and remodeled. The region will need about 55,000 new housing units by 2050. And as stricter laws are implemented, it's very important to provide information and incentives so people can meet these laws while still keeping buildings affordable. An example would be requiring that new local government facilities and other public buildings demonstrate green building technologies and practices, such as installing those LED lights or having better heating systems to be more energy efficient. The next strategy is increase the production of local renewable energy, which would increase the amount of local renewable energy produced by all of these buildings. State action is very important on this, but local level action can be significant too. This will be done mainly by creating broader access to solar. So an example would be to develop/support a city-sponsored group solar purchasing program. This would be sponsored by local governments and nonprofits like Olympia Community Solar, and homeowners, business owners, and property managers. If you're a homeowner or business owner, you can learn about getting solar for your home or business, which would be amazing. And then the final strategy is to convert to cleaner fuel sources. So this would pass laws and educate the public in order to transition to cleaner fuel sources in buildings. Green electricity is important, but electricity is not the only fuel source that is used. We have natural gas, which is cleaner than coal, but leaks methane and should be phased out. So an example of this would be to update municipal codes to require electric appliances in new construction. And the main implementer for that would be local governments. And now I will be passing it back to Laszlo.
Hello again. I'm here to now present the transportation and land use section of the TCMP. The first strategy in this section is to set land use policies that increase our urban density to support efficient transportation networks and reduce urban sprawl. This is important for helping to reduce our region's emissions because when we live close to the places where we work and shop and go to school and all of that, we don't need to drive around as much. So obviously we're reducing our emissions. An example of an action from this strategy is increasing the number of what's called 20-minute neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods where the basic needs of all the residents, like groceries, can be met without needing to depend on a car, just like you walk down the street. The second strategy in this section is to increase the efficiency of our transportation system. This will help reduce our county's emissions by relieving congestion so drivers can spend less time on the road and burn less fuel. This can include things like reevaluating our speed limits and where traffic signals versus roundabouts would be more effective. The next strategy in the transportation land use section is to increase the adoption of electric vehicles. Our electricity in Washington state is increasingly coming from renewable sources, which means that electrifying our transportation can have a significant impact on our emissions. One strategy for this is for local governments to require all new residential buildings to be built EV ready, for example, having charging equipment readily available in their parking facilities. The fourth strategy is to increase the use of our public transit. More people riding public transit means more people are getting out of their cars, and a main action included in the TCMP is for intercity transit to maintain their current fareless transit system, since that's allowing so many more people than ever to be able to ride public transit. The last strategy in the transportation and land use section is to increase the use of active forms of traveling, like walking and cycling. This will, of course, reduce our region's emissions by getting more people out of cars and vehicles and improving public health and potentially benefiting low-income and other marginalized communities by reducing the need for private vehicles. Like we said with all the other sections, best way to advocate for this is to write to your local governments, speak up about all of this, and I'll pass it back to Dio yet again.
I hope you're not tired of seeing me. Hello. So, I will be talking about the final focus area. You're almost done. Congratulations. The final focus area is cross-cutting. So, cross-cutting is the miscellaneous category. It's really about general strategies that citizens and local governments can take. So, the first strategy is conduct education and outreach across climate mitigation areas. The beginning of action is education. How can we expect a citizen to be climate conscious if they don't have the resources or information? An example of this outreach would be a presentation in an elementary school about recycling. The second strategy is to enhance monitoring and evaluation of climate mitigation measures and outcomes. That means basically studying the impacts of climate change, specifically on disadvantaged people, the people who are hit the hardest in abnormally hot summers or smoky air. The impacts of climate change are happening now, and many people in our community are feeling the effects firsthand. It's essential that our local government pays attention to the active consequences of climate change, not just future ones. The third and final strategy in cross-cutting is to advocate for climate mitigating state and federal policy. This means that climate justice should be one of the top legislative priorities for our elected officials, and that they'll strive to pass more climate legislation. Our government, by passing this plan, has pledged to advocate for climate mitigation policies, and we must hold them accountable. This could be accomplished by writing letters to your local city council, showing up to city council meetings and giving comment, and or being part of climate demonstrations and strikes. It is our local government's responsibility to listen to our concerns and act swiftly in regard to climate change. But the battle starts with you and me. This event is a great way to get started, and where do we go from here? So, with that, I welcome any questions people might have. You can either shout them out or put them in the chat. You guys come here, and we will do our best to answer them.
Thank you, Dio, Jamie, and Laszlo. I saw you have a very long comment from John Gear, but maybe he wants to speak it aloud, or you could read it. Or we have a question.
And then we do have a hand up as well.
I'm glad to read my excessively long comment if that's my cue. Is that my cue?
Dio says go for it.
I got to find it again. So I wanted to thank the Dio, Laszlo, and Jamie for doing this. I'm so enthused and glad that you are on the job. I really wanted to do what old people typically do, which is claim to be asking a question while actually just ranting. But I wanted to make sure you guys knew, and that everybody who's watching this and cares about this subject understands that Thurston County is right now doing a comprehensive plan update. The comprehensive plan is the plan for development for the next few decades. And right now, it's not in secret, they're talking about doing it, but most people aren't paying attention, and they don't realize that right now the commissioners are defining the scope of what the comp plan update is supposed to accomplish. And that means if you want the comp plan update to put carbon emission reductions at the center, you have to be talking to them. They're having a work session on March 1st, and we need everybody who cares about climate for the next 30 years to be pushing and demanding that the county commissioners center the development plans for the county for the next 30 years around hitting the goals of the climate mitigation plan. If we don't do this, then as we go forward in the years to come, we'll keep getting told, well, it's not in the plan. It's not in the development plan. The development plan is hugely important. It actually controls what goes on. And so if you want this, this zine, which I really like, by the way, if you want all these strategies centered, then you need to push the county commissioners to say, we're going to plan for development in the county in a way that hits these targets and uses these strategies, because otherwise we'll just be talking to ourselves. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a very important thing to bring up. So you said there's a meeting on March 1st. Is that like, is the public welcome to attend and give public comment?
Absolutely. Yes. Actually, I shouldn't say that until I check, but I know that they're having a work session on March 1st, and I believe it's at 10 in the morning. I'll hop on Google here and put it in the chat. But it is definitely open for public monitoring, and I think they'll probably be taking comments.
All right, thank you. I see a hand up.
Yeah, this is Wendy Stephenson. I'm sorry, I couldn't, my kid's name is on there and I couldn't get it to change. So I need, I need a teenager to come change it for me. But I'm thinking that this is super great information, and I'm wondering if we could work together to have like a letter writing session, because sometimes when you say, hey, everybody, make a phone call or write a letter, sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. But if we can actually get people together like after service and do like a letter writing exercise, that might get us more letters. So that's just an idea.
Yes, that would be very nice. I'm sure we could work with OUC and make something happen.
If you would like to, I think that would be a great email for Reverend Sarah, and that she would love to work on an idea like that.
And I want to add my thanks, Dio, Jamie, and Laszlo, for sharing your energy and this information with us. I've been thinking about some of the decisions before OUC, listening to your presentation today, and we're in the middle of an upgrade to our old gas furnaces, and we've got some decisions to make about how we do that going forward. And so the things that you shared really help remind me of the values that we hold and how we live those out in all of the decisions that we make. So thank you so much. I so appreciate that you took your Sunday morning to be with us online.
Yes, thank you. I see something in the chat from James about Tumwater's sustainability coordinator, Alyssa Jones-Wood. I actually know her. She is very amazing. And actually, I'm not sure if all of the local governments have a sustainability coordinator, but I know at least that Olympia does. Pamela Braff, I believe. And Tyke actually has met with Alyssa and has worked with her on what youth what our priorities are from the different strategies in the TCMP, and we've worked with her. So we're on it.
This is Wendy Eklund, and I want to thank you guys. You have done a great job of making it succinct, understandable, which is sort of inspiring because overwhelm is one of the biggest problems that gets in our way of being active. So thank you. And then people talk about energy conservation. I think you did mention energy efficiency in there, because, like new kinds of heat pumps that use carbon dioxide for the refrigerant and different things like that have been really important to the regional energy folks, the RTAC. So yeah, you can do the same job with a different way of doing it, and it uses a lot less energy and reduces the carbon footprint. So efficiency, because I just get upset when they always talk about energy conservation, because that sounds like, oh, you can't do all that stuff anymore. And yeah, conserving is good, but efficiency makes it easier to accomplish.
I totally agree. Hand raised.
Thank you. Just wanted to thank you all for the work on this. And also I think this collectivist action, is really important for us to be working on as a county and also with our local municipalities and even going further out into the state. But in addition, I think our individual actions also make a difference. And so I would just encourage everyone to just demonstrate leadership in this topic. There's all kinds of things we can do. We don't need to fly as much as we fly. In fact, maybe we don't need to fly at all. Maybe we should all be taking trains and driving more greener vehicles when we have to drive. Ride your bike more. We don't have to be eating as much meat as we're eating. Meat is a huge carbon driver for the environment. So there's lots of things we can be doing as individuals. And I hope that everyone takes that call seriously. It is part of our values as Unitarian Universalists. And so thank you again for all of your service here. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Hand raised.
Yeah, I just have a request. I had to be bumped off for a minute as we switched over from the generator now that our power's back. Speaking of energy, but could you put the link to the zine back in the chat, because it's not there for me anymore. Thank you so much. It looked really good from what I saw of it.
Teresa, thank you for putting that in the chat so quickly. Dorothy?
Yes, I may have missed it, but I just want to say I'm really grateful because I was not going to read a 120-page document. You guys are fabulous. I love how you just pointed out the most. Can you specifically talk a little bit about whether there's anything about protecting legacy forests? And because we do have some older trees, and like the county, I think, can say we won't cut anything that's older than 1950 or something. Is that included in the document, or did you mention it and I missed it?
It's not specifically mentioned in the bit of the forestry section that I read, but I'm sure there are like strategies and protections for it somewhere in there. It just didn't make it into the summary. But I would think that there was definitely probably a couple strategies for protection of those in with like the regenerative agriculture sections.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
And Wendy Stephenson, I wondered if you'd like to put in a plug here for your 1 o'clock speaker on legacy forests.
Yes, thank you. And so I think somebody changed my name for me. Thank you. It's SEN, if you could make that change too. Anyways, yeah, at 1 p.m. we are going to have a topic on legacy forests, and Lynn Fitzhugh is very familiar with kind of statewide legislation as well as local Thurston County legislation. And so she will be able to answer that question for you, Dorothy. And so that'll be at 1 p.m. Look forward to seeing you all there.
On this same Zoom link. Well, that is the end of our time here. I don't see any more questions. I just wanted to say thank you to Dio, Jamie, and Laszlo.
Thank you all very much for taking time out of your Sunday to listen to us, sort of just jabber at you. And thank you, OUUC, for having us, and Riven Rear Gear. Just thank you all very much. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
And it looks like John here put a bunch more in the chat. So if you know how to save the chat, there's 3 dots down there at the bottom that you can click and hit save chat, and it'll put it in a text file for you. Or we can just leave the meeting open for a few minutes if you want to read that.
I'm happy to leave the meeting up a couple minutes.
Some short courses and more information about what's going on. No. Yeah.
It's a community class on how to get involved in the comp plan. How does the comp plan update work, and how can you get involved effectively? So, you know, they're scoping the comp plan update now, so the decisions they make now will carry for years and years. And they need to hear that they should put climate at the center of the plan.
Thank you very much for all that information and the important reminder.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
We're gonna take off, but if any of you have any remaining questions or resources you want to share or anything, Tyke has an email. I believe it is. Let me just actually put it in the chat. That makes way more sense than me trying to read it out loud. So give me 1 second and I'll put that in there.
And as always, if there's follow-up needed, please reach out to me or Reverend Sarah. And if you have questions, we can make sure that they get to Tyke. Thank you again, everyone, for your engagement.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Right, and I have saved the chat. So if anyone missed something or didn't figure out how to save it themselves, you could email tech@ouuc.org and I will get it to you. All right, thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Carbon and Teresa.
Yeah, and we'll be back in an hour for that legacy forests presentation. So thank you.
Yes, on the same link.